After noticing a rapid increase in the number of criminals dying from heart attacks, Loliet, a kind of god of deductions better known as L, begins to investigate the Kira case, a serial killer who seems to kill mostly criminals throughout Japan. However, what for L seemed like just another everyday job ends up revealing itself as one of his greatest professional and even personal challenges, since his unscrupulous opponent ends up using one of L's greatest weaknesses for his own victory, and in this case, to L's detriment. This weakness at first will be his enormous arrogance. At first, L operates driven by a central value: truth above any social narrative. He doesn't care about opinions, reputation, appearance, or social roles. His identity is reasoning itself. In fact, he is so focused on this that the only person he seems to relate to is his paternal figure, Watari, a kind of butler to him. But in the same way that his lifestyle ends up giving L so much of his fortune and success, it also comes with a very high cost. L becomes obsessed with finding the true Kira, and after starting to suspect a high school student Light Yagami, besides getting close to him personally, L also places various cameras in the Yagami's house just to monitor everything Light and his family do during the day. And here I was thinking that spending my whole day watching YouTube was a waste of time. Anyway, the fact is that this shows two things. First, a huge obsession to discover the truth, and second, the capacity to do whatever it takes to find it. However, the same tendency to seek the pure truth that he defends ends up creating L's greatest fragility. That would be becoming reluctant to realize that truth without adaptation is just a half victory, because precisely due to the inability to change and adapt, he only realizes this when it's already too late, when Kira, a guy with no scruples at all, starts manipulating L's emotions and bonds to his own advantage, precisely the fields in which L never ventured into. In my view, L is a classic INTP. He uses dominant EI, or introverted thinking, which gives him this investigative, analytical look, similar to a Sherlock Holmes. This is clearly perceived in the way he deduces, as early as in the beginning of the anime, by making a TV broadcast, expecting that Kira, as the killer, to watch it, and then to kill the man in the TV, and thus determining that Kira lived in the Kanto region where the broadcast aired alone. One of the things that defines this function is precisely cause and effect. For everything that is, there must be a reason. Everything that happens needs to be justified, and if there isn't, it needs to be investigated. But unfortunately, that's exactly where L ends up being so arrogant. Even though scientific studies show that, yes, spending more time pondering options, ideas, and problems is associated with greater intelligence, that is, if you're taking a test, it's possible that spending more time thinking about the question and the prompt will lead you to greater success. But the problem is that while tests are quite objective, and just as the INTP likes, they present defined answers, when it comes to people and relationships, this objectivity that dominant EI seeks goes out of the window. People are not objects, and much less objective. We may have a certain pattern, but we rarely do things that are always linked to reason. And that's exactly where L errs so much. Even though he expected Light Yagami to be Kira, he never thought that Kira would be such an immoral person. In other words, he failed to use both his auxiliary NE, extroverted intuition, and his inferior FE, extroverted feeling, his shadow. While NE is about seeing different possibilities, in this case, of the different things that could indeed happen, FE is about relationships and ethical values, something L always ignored. He always ignores seeing things through the head and values the Light, or rather Kira, had. And his values were simple: being willing to do anything not to get caught, and continue killing or punishing people with his death note. Although he always saw the truth, he forgot what the Greek philosophers like Socrates and Plato that sought it so much showed. Truth is not made up of only one side. It is always dialectical. Even though it is possible to try to discover what is true, this never comes from imposing one's own thoughts. Socrates always debated with other people. He always saw the other side and used that to construct the conclusions of his dialogues. In other words, he becomes stagnant in what is the INTP's looping function, something very common for this type, which is his tertiary SI, introverted sensing, turning L into an infinite introversion loop, where he becomes his own point of reference, never needing to see other possibilities beyond those he has already reasoned with his apparently superior intellect, and much less consider the spontaneity and flexibility that the people around him possesses. Even though L tries to calculate the world and others like machines, virtually, or rather fortunately, we are not like that. When he discovers that his butler, Watari, the only member of his family, was in danger, he despairs, showing that in the end, even L himself was not a machine. Not only for caring so much about someone to the point of losing in his mental game he was playing against Kira, but also for discovering that his calculations were not so perfect and that even the god of deductions was capable of making mistakes. Here, a mistake so serious that it led to his death. And that's it. That was the video. Share, like, and comment. And if you are an INTP, learn to be more flexible in your ideas and more empathetic with people, so you don't end up like L. My name is Julius Caesar, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.